Fishing in and around this stuff absolutely fries people's brains. It does require specialist tackle, it does require specialist tactics. And what I'm going to do over the next couple of sessions is show you how I fish in and around this stuff really effectively. You'll get simple solutions that you can follow that turn a weedy lake from something you dread into something you look forward to. We're at Embryo Stanton in the heart of Oxfordshire. As you can see, it is a very weedy water, typical of loads of lakes up and down the country and in Europe as well. And in here are 75 absolutely stunning carp, any of which I would dearly love to catch. So let's get on with fishing in the weed. Location is without doubt the most important aspect of carp fishing, and it's the thing most people either get wrong or don't put any effort into. If you turn up and fish a swim because you can be near your mate, then you're probably going to blank, especially on lakes like this. I always arrive at first light at the start of a session. That's when the fish are going to show, and I'll just lap and lap the lake. I'll leave the gear in the car so there's no temptation to set up in the swim and cast out, because once you're welded to that swim you can only see a small portion of the lake and you could miss fish that are 2 or 3 swims down showing their heads one after the other. So I just lap and lap the lake. It is a laborious task, you know, it takes a lot of effort, and I understand why people don't do it. Getting up at 3 o'clock in the morning is no one's idea of fun. It's not mine either, I promise you, but it's so important to get you on the right track at the start of the session. I basically saw fish all the way down this side of the lake off the back of the wind. So if you looked at the weather, you could have gone on the other side where the southwesterly is going to be blowing into, chuck rods out there because it said it in a book somewhere that fishing in the wind in the summer is good. You know, but we just waited and seen a few fish show, and then basically flipped a coin of who gets first choice. Because this is a syndicate, there's a rota for the weekdays and a rota for the weekends. There was another member here, so the 2 of us just flipped a coin. He won the toss, he's gone in the swim a bit further down. He saw the same fish that I did, but there were fish showing in front of this swim called the walkout as well. So they're very close to the bank, so I'm not going to do loads of commotion. I'm going to try and get out fairly quietly, but if you're not walking around looking for fish, you're going to spend a long time sitting behind motionless rods. There she goes. Oh, that's so shallow, but clean as a whistle. Okay, that is the 3 starting spots sorted, and I've taken quite a lot of casts. It's the middle of the day now, the sun's high in the sky, the fish are not feeding. I can see them, they're cruising around, sort of literally just a few rod lengths out. They're bow waving at the back of the lilies and stuff, and what I've done is put a few baits out to start off with just to try and scare them away. It hasn't really done that, to be honest, and they've been cruising through as I've been casting the marker lead out. But the important thing is a marker rod with braid on it and just a lead on the end of the line. That is so important. No marker float, because all that does is get caught up in the weed. The lead is one of the probe leads, so it hasn't got prongs on it, so I can skip it back through the weed, you know, if I don't find a clear spot. And that's what I've been doing, basically just casting out at the range where I saw the fish showing this morning, the range where I saw the bubbles coming up, and just cast progressively further and further away from the lilies until I've found a clear area out there. So on the right hand side, I'm actually going to fish in the weed with a slow sinking bottom bait with what we call a wafter, and then the middle rod, which is probably about a rod length to the left of it, there's a big clear area there. It's probably a rod length wide, and I'm going to fish on one edge of it. And with that one, again, I'm going to fish a wafter hook bait, but I'm going to fish it on a lead clip rather than on a helicopter rig, which is what I'm going to do in the weed. And then further left still, then I've got another prominent tree that I'm casting out there at the same range. I've gone around the distance sticks. Once I've found that clear spot, I've gone around the distance sticks. It's 8 rod lengths or just under to that clear spot. And now I'm landing sort of in the middle of it because I've gone out a rod length further, cast again, and I'm still landing on clear. But I just really want to be at the area where I saw the bubbles coming up and where I saw the fish showing. And that 3rd rod again is landing in weed, so it's a bit deeper there, so there's a little bit more time before the lead hits the bottom. It's a firm thud, but it is caught up in weed when I pull it in, and I'm going to put a wafter on that one as well. I'm not going to fish any pop-ups to start off with, because I found at this time of the year when the fish have been really hammered all season on pop-ups, you know, the weed, the Canadian pondweed out there, looking at it in the edge, it's just a big mat of weed. So if you use a helicopter rig, the hook link can slide back up, the lead goes into the weed, the hook link sits on top. It's a stiff hook link made of boom, and I'm hoping that that wafter will just sit in the top layers of the weed and not be too obvious at all. So what I'm going to do now is basically spray bait all over this area. I really don't care where it goes. If it goes short, if it goes long, I don't care. I want the fish out there picking up baits, just picking up one, picking up another one, picking up another one, and not really sort of honing in on a spot. I'm going to halve all the baits as well. I'm going to use 18mm link. It's my favourite boilie at the moment. I'm going to halve them all. They don't make anything like as much splash, which is good when the fish are around and they're feeding, but in this situation they really spread out the catapult. I've got the heavy catapult with the thicker elastic. That'll fire them out easily the distance. I can probably get them another 10 yards past where I'm fishing, and I will feed like that all the way round in a big arc. So there's probably 2 kilos of boilies spread all over this area. And then I'm not going to put rods out. If the sun's high in the sky, the fish can see absolutely everything at the moment. They're not in a feeding mood, so I'd rather leave the bait out there, let the fish come in and investigate it. They're going to know it's there because they're all around this area. And then later on this afternoon, as the sun starts to drop, I'll trickle a bit more bait out and then put the rods out, hopefully to get a bite in the evening, but more so for tomorrow morning. That is bite time. Just giving the line just a little bit of time to settle. I'm just carefully putting them back on the rests. Just taking a little bit of line off so everything stays nice and slack. The worst thing you can do now is move the lead or move the hook and put it into a bit of weed. So the right hand rod I've brought in a little bit closer than I was going to fish it, just because I've been watching like a hawk all day with no line in the water, and the fish have been coming in closer than I originally sort of cast around to. So I've come back to 6.5 rod lengths for this one. This one's fished on a helicopter rig with a boom hook link, one of the D-rig kickers on a size 2 curve with a wafter hook bait. So I've cast this one onto some Canadian pondweed, which looks, from what I can see out there, like it's matted on the bottom. It's not all coming up in different places. It looks like a big carpet. So what I'm hoping, the lead's gone in. I've put a little bit of rig foam onto the hook, so that lifts everything up off the bottom, and when that melts, the wafter is just going to sit down on top of that carpet of Canadian. And then these other two I've basically brought in a little bit closer. They're just under 6 rod lengths each, onto the clear spot, because I noticed fish were actually feeding this afternoon really close in on the clear spot, and closer in than I was fishing. And what I didn't want was the line going out through the clear spot and the fish are feeding short of where my rig is, keep touching the line all the time and spooking. So I've come back to the edge of the clear spot, the near edge of the clear spot. It's not an easy cast to do because the water's very shallow, probably only about 3 foot deep. And these two fished on the clear spot are on hybrid lead clips. I've got a boom hook link on, again a size 2 curve with an 18mm match the hatch link wafter. So we're out. We'll see what happens overnight. If the fish have moved in the morning, there we go, then we will move also. But I'm hoping they're going to turn back up. A few fish have been rocking at the back of the lilies. I think they've been hiding in the lilies today where it's been so hot. And I've just seen a couple of fish rocking. So I'll put a few baits out first to spook anything away before I put the casts out. Took me a few casts to get it right. There's a new swim for me. I've never fished it before. And you have to be certain that you're on the money. And you're confident then when the fish turn up you're going to get a bite. So everything's ready to go. Action stations. The world is starting to wake up, the cars are starting to come past, and the sun's just about to creep over the horizon. It's no wonder that the fish were on this side of the lake yesterday morning. The sun beats into here first thing in the morning, and the fish know that and they take advantage of it. And what basically happens on all lakes that have got weed in, the weed will start to produce oxygen as soon as it starts to get light. More oxygen means more fish activity, which means they're going to feed. So the first few hours of daylight is probably the best time on weedy lakes, especially in the height of summer. Night times can be quite quiet. Last night I had bleeps on every rod. The lines have tightened up slightly, and I suspect they were liners. The fish were coming in very close yesterday, and You know, I put a fair bit of chopped boilie out there, probably 3 or 4 kilos spread over a big area. I'll be very surprised if I've been done on every rod. I just think it was fish moving backwards and forwards through, so I've slackened them back off a little bit. But I'm just going to give it the next few hours. When we got into the swims at like 10 o'clock yesterday morning, they were still rocking the water out there, bow waving around. We'd seen when we'd sent the drone up in the morning that there were fish feeding on that clear area there. So it's a case of just sitting tight, wait for the activity to start happening. If they show somewhere else, you know, then we can move around there later on. But I want to go through bite time in this spot and just see if what happened yesterday happens again. And I know I say to people, you know, always get there early, and I know it's not possible for a lot of people. You know, you've got to work, you turn up Friday evening, having not seen what's gone on in the morning. My advice on that one is if you can get to the lake just for a walk round first thing in the morning, if it's not too far away, do it before you go to work and then come back that evening armed with that information. Or if you can't do that, just try and get on the grapevine, you know, talk to other anglers. If you fish the lake a lot, you will make friends on the bank. And if you can share information where they're showing that morning, it puts you in really good stead for when you get there later on in the day.
Sadly, bite time came and went. The sun rose high in the sky and I just knew the chance was gone. So rather than sit behind motionless rods, I decided to bring a new part of my armoury into play. I first used the Aspen weed rake at Gigantica to clear the marginal weed in the swims and quickly realised how efficient it was, and since then I've used it many times to create marginal spots. The swim opposite rarely gets fished, so it was an ideal place to rake as I know fish patrol this quiet margin, and I could keep an eye on it from the walkout swim opposite. After a quiet night, the morning soon saw me into the first fish of the trip.
What a battle. Come on, get in that net. Get in that net. Boss, got him, come on. Oh, what a battle. Thank God for strong kit. Whew. Well, it's amazing how everything can turn on a dime. This morning it wasn't looking good. I've been up since 4. And I've seen one fish show in the bay behind me, and I saw one show out off the corner of the area, but I wasn't certain whether it was a carp or not. And then literally 2 minutes before I got the bite, a carp definitely showed on the back of the area, really close to the rod that went. And interestingly, it was the pop-up that went, the one that I've cast away from the clear area. The hook link slid back up the lead core, got a little foam nugget around the hook to hold it up above the weed. It's probably gone into a foot, maybe 18 inches of weed, and that is the one that's gone. But I'm going to leave it out of the water now for a couple of hours. I'll put the fish into the sling. The hook was already out, and I could see it nailed it right in the bottom lip. You could see that as I was playing it as well. So, and I had to properly pull hard to get that one in. It was going to do me round the back of the lilies, and that's why you need really strong kit on. So the fish can sit there for a little while just to recover. I'll probably give it to 8 o'clock before I put this rod back out again. I'll definitely put more bait out before I put the rod out and see if I can get a daytime bite as well. But for now it's looking really good. There's got to be more than one fish out there. I put a lot of bait out yesterday, so there's every chance one of those other rods could roar off in the next couple of hours. Yeah man, check that out. Just under 20 pounds, but who cares? An absolute wood carving of an Oxfordshire common carp, and that rod's definitely going back out on the weed tonight. I might even put 2 out there. Surprising that one went first, but you never know, the fish may prefer feeding in the weed to on the clear areas. That's why it's always worth spreading your rods out to start off with, see what works on that particular lake,
on that particular session, and then you can swap wild rods to it. And this was on a link pop-up, matched the hatch over a load of link, and the pop-up was soaked in the all-important garlic goo. Wicked. Mwah. Off you go. Yes. With no more action coming to the remaining rods, I decided to reel in and rest the spot. This is a killer tactic that very few people use. Baiting the swim with no lines often allows the fish to start feeding when fishing 24/7 would keep them at a distance. Upon closer inspection, the area I'd raked the previous day was showing signs of feeding fish. Some serious bubbling was all I needed to fold up 2 rods and head over there. I was using a chopped up link wafter with a layer of garlic goo mounted on the same rig as earlier, a spinner rig with a size 2 curve and a D-rig kicker. Once again, instead of crashing the rig straight in, I wanted to gently move the fish away with a little sprinkling of bait and then quietly lower my rigs, hoping that they would come back.
I've got a chance on the left and the right. I reckon the right's going to go if I had to put money on one of them, but it's not going to rain. I've got a good few hours until I need to rebait the rods over there, so let's see what happens. Oh, it's right under the trees. Oh. Yeah, still on. Get the waders on. Oh, it's done me.
It all happened so quickly. The fish found its way into a snag and managed to ditch the hook. I was gutted. I absolutely hate losing them, but it proved that raking has worked and I could now keep baiting the areas with a few chops and keep an eye on them for the rest of the session. But for now, the weather had turned and it was about time to head back to my original swim and get sorted for the evening. Once back in the walkout swim, it was only a matter of minutes before I got a chance to redeem myself.
Literally 5 minutes in the water. As I came back round here, obviously there's been no line in this swim all afternoon, and I saw 2 fish. Oh, I saw 2 fish head and shoulder just off the lilies where I'd put the chop baits on the very first day. And they've obviously come back in and been eating it. Just flicked one out just past them, another one shown there now at the back of the lilies. And obviously they're in a feeding mood, managed to get the first cast out there, and we're in. Not round there. Come on. It's a decent ghostie. Get in that net. Ooh, not yet. Just come on. This time. Come on. Come on. Yes, got him. Oh, what a result.
With the fish recovering in the sling and the light fading, I could finally get my other rods out and then admire my prize.
24 3/4. Wicked.
Or so I thought.
Just short of the lilies. Thank God I had the waders on. Thank God I've got £20 line on as well. This is why we need strong kit. Battles like this is just a joke. There he is, big long one. I've put no bait out in the swim at all since I've got back, and the fish have continued to show even after getting that ghosty. Fish have continued to show, and they've clearly just turned up on this bait that sat out there since day one, not been eaten, and now they've turned up on it. This isn't even where I put the bait last night, where I had the fish from this morning. This is closer in and more right than that. And it just shows you it will sit out there until a carp comes along, and they've clearly been troughing on it while I've been round the other side trying to catch one out the edge, and now they've got their confidence up and they've got a taste for this link. It's starting to get really good. Appears like he's given up. Maybe not. Come on, fella. In you come, you big long Oxfordshire carp. Epic battle in the net. Bosh, got him! Oh man, that is wicked. This is what carp fishing is all about, man. Awesome. Check that out. What an absolutely awesome carp. This is exactly why I came to Stanton. Just beautiful beast like this. Led me a proper merry dance. Thank God I had the waders on, and I didn't realise it was so shallow out there. Managed to get the angle on it, and had to pull its head off at some points, and that's why it's so important when you're fishing weedy lakes. You've got to have strong kit on. You know, I've got 25-pound hook link that's crimped, probably breaks at about 30-pound, a size 4 wide apex, super strong hook, and then 20-pound touchdown. The strongest mono you can get, and everyone says, oh, why do you guys use such strong mono? That fight is exactly why. What a crazy one that is. And the tip here is always watch your swim before you cast out, because I've not been here for hours now. Put bait out earlier on, and the fish have obviously turned up on it, and I was gonna put loads of bait out, but I saw a couple of fish show, put one rod out, got it out there first time, and this is the result. 24 pound, 12 ounces. We shall call him the Carrot.
What a way to end the day. After a lost fish, there's no better feeling than to bag 2 in half an hour.
Right hand rod again. Nice way to be woken up. You notice when I'm playing all my fish, I keep the rod low generally, and I've learnt that from the match boys, the likes of Steve Ringer and that. They all play their fish with the rod really low, and it tends to bring the fish up in the water, believe it or not. If you put the rod up in the air, the fish tends to dive down deep. If you play your fish to the side, they tend to come up more on the surface, and dumping the lead as well on the heli-safe is just an absolute godsend, especially at this time of the year when it's weedy. You know, the fish are spawned out, they've got loads of energy, not masses of weight, so they charge around really quick. I'm also playing the fish quite hard, you know. If the rod's hardly bending and they keep weeding you up, it can be really problematic. All those things combined can make the difference between losing them in the weed and landing them. Come on, fella, you are mine. Get in that net. Oh, shh! What a way to start the day. Wicked. Bigger, bigger, big, as my little girl says. Yeah, what an awesome fish. 27-12 this one, and the fish are really on the bait now. I'm using Mainline's link. It's my favourite summer bait by far now. Everywhere I take it, it just absolutely smashes it. And on lakes like this, I wouldn't even do a night without probably 2 or 3 kilo with me. A lot of people, you know, they bring half a kilo, put 50 baits out, and wonder why they don't get a bite. And at this time of the year, the fish are really looking for calories. They're trying to build their weight back up for the winter, So give them some bait, 2 or 3 key a night at least, and if there's loads of fish around, even more. This is the rig I use for casting on and around weed. If you just wanted one rig to do everything on a weedy lake, this would be it. So to talk about the most important bit first, the lead system side of it. The rig must be presented in the top layers of the weed, and using a helicopter rig allows that to happen. So on the end I've got helicopter lead. It's nice and flat on the bottom, which means when the lead hits the bottom I can feel that little bit more, and that's really, really important. You want to know whether you're in 6 inches of weed, 2 foot of weed or 6 foot of weed. So having a 3 ounce lead on with that flat bottom will tell you just enough so you can set your top bead so that the hook link slides up on the cast, stays there as it goes through the water and presents the hook bait in the top. So I've got a heli-safe on the end of the lead core leader, and that allows me to dump the lead on the take, and that's really important. In this situation you want the fish up in the water, away from the weed, so they're not constantly snagging you up. I don't dump the lead in every situation, and you can put a little collar in these. If I'm fishing other lakes that have got no weed in, but maybe they're a bit silty and I don't want to dump the lead, I'll put the collar in and keep the lead on. But here, having the lead on is probably going to lose you fish, so you need to be ejecting it. I've got a lead core leader on, not a really long lead core leader. Again, there's a fashion for using 6, 8, 10 foot of this stuff. It casts like an absolute pig. You get more crack-offs and stuff with it like that. And to be honest, it's much more visible than the mono is, so I want to get off the lead core and onto the mono as quickly as possible. But obviously, you need some length to it so that the hook link can slide up, hit that top no trace bead, the lead can plummet down into the weed and present your hook bait above. So this one's probably about 2.5, 3 foot long. You know, I would go up to maybe 5 foot if I was fishing in really deep weed, and have the top bead set right up near the top of the leader. It's not going to tangle, so it's actually, there's still a little bit of lead core above the hook link, so the hook link can't come into contact with the main line. That's really, really important, but it is set up a long way. And what happens when this goes down through the water column, the actual force of the lead going down and the resistance against the hook bait is going to push it up towards that top bead. Once it comes to rest, what I've found is that the hook link actually slides back down the lead core and just rests in wherever the top of the weed is. So it doesn't matter if the top bead's too high, but you don't want it too low. If it was only a few inches above the lead system and it dragged a whole lot into the weed, you're not even fishing. The fish can't get the bait in its mouth, and they're going to clean out all your free offerings, and you're not going to get a take. One of the other things that I think should be mandatory with lead core leaders and helicopter rigs is that no trace system. So that bead with a split on it will pop off of that collar and allow the hook link to get completely off the top of the lead core leader. So if you do unfortunately snap up when you're playing a fish, the fish can get away from the lead core leader by popping that bead off. Now moving on to the hook link. So I've got a very, very stiff hook link. I like stiff hook links in weed because I think it repels the weed. Rather than getting tangled up in it, when it comes to rest, you can just imagine this sitting on the fronds of weed rather than disappearing down into them or getting tangled up in them. So this is 25-pound boom. I've crimped it at either end, so I've got a size 11 ring swivel on there that's sliding up and down the lead core, and then I've got one of the spinner swivels on the other end, and then the hook is attached to that. That's the spinner rig, or the Ronnie rig as it's called, and basically if you don't know about this rig, where have you been? Virtually everybody in the world is using it at the moment, and the reason for that is very, very easy to put together, but it's a very efficient hooker of fish. And it's that swivel there that's attached to the hook that enables the hook to spin and catch hold so easily. You can see as I'm doing it there, that hook is just spinning round. So as the fish suck it up, the hook link tightens, the hook flips over and catches hold. And then the hook is a size 4 wide gape X, a very, very strong hook, a beaked point, which basically means when it goes in, it curves in rather than going in straight, and I think it holds it in better. And the only fish I've lost in this session, ironically, has been on a straight pointed hook, a size 2 curve. I think if I'd had one of these on, I probably would have landed that fish. So it's very fashionable to use a curved shank hook with this rig at the moment. That's what you see on Instagram and in all the magazines and everything. I've been using it in wide gapes for quite a long time, you know, because it sits beautifully. As you can see, if I hold that still, it's just cocked over like a claw. You can just see as that goes in, the point's going to be facing towards the flesh and it's going to react really quickly. But with that beaked point and thick gauge hook, you know, that stays in that bit better, and you can see some of the battles I've had have been absolutely epic. If you were ever going to lose one, it was going to be then, and this has stayed in perfectly. I'm using a medium-sized kicker with a little bit trimmed off it just to cover up the join between the spinner swivel and the hook. And you see there, that's so neat. There's no need for shrink tube anymore. I can tie this whole rig without using the steam at all. And then the bait is attached to a micro ring swivel. And what I've basically done is pulled a bit of floss through that bait and literally just blobbed the end of it with a lighter, pressed it down with a lighter to stop it coming off. These cork dust pop-ups from Mainline, these are the link ones, are really, really tough. There's no way a bird's going to pull that off, even if that's been sitting out there all night. And that just comes up and stops against the hook bead. I have mine round so the thin end is basically butting up against that swivel. A lot of people have it the other way round. There's loads of chatter on the internet about what is the right way to do it. Both work perfectly. You know, it's just personal preference really, but I just like the angle that it sits at. You can see there, it's just cocked over like a claw, just ready to grab the flesh. Very, very important to have a really buoyant pop-up, and these are super buoyant. I've been developing these with Mainline. There's 25% cork dust in this bait, and that will hold that hook upright even overnight. So that's really important. You don't want it falling over and the hook ending up in the weed. So that is basically the rig I've been getting my bites on at Stanton. As I said at the beginning, if you were looking for one solution to fishing on any weedy lake, this would be it. Always nice the smell of carp at the end of a fishing session. I've done better than expected. I was hoping for a bite or two. I've had 5 bites, landed 4. The raking has definitely worked. Creating a spot, you know, that was pretty weedy before and had lots of sticks and stuff on it, and then feeding it, definitely got the fish in feeding there. So I'll definitely be taking that into the next session. I've got my eye on a little corner that they call, I think it's Windy Corner, I think they call it. There's also a spot sort of on the far bank that I've seen fish showing on pretty regularly. I've been watching like a hawk the whole time, and even though I'm getting bites here, I'm still scanning the rest of the lake. And I've noticed, especially as it's cooled down a little bit, the fish have moved away from this part of the lake, which is a little bit shallower, down into the deeper area. And there's a guy further down the bank who's had a couple of really nice fish today. I think that coincides with the fact the wind swung northwesterly. It's a lot cooler than when we first got here, and those fish that were charging about on these shallows when we first got here, it seemed to have sort of disappeared. Maybe, you know, the fish I've caught will spooked them down there as well, but it's definitely something to keep logged in the memory banks. All the spots I've had bites from are already in my phone, so if I come back into this swim, I know exactly how many wraps it is. And I think probably most interestingly, all my bites have come through fishing on top of the weed, not on the clear spots. And most people would be obsessed with finding those clear areas, and there are some lovely ones out there. I tried it at the start and it just didn't work. So fishing the little tiny link pop-ups on a spinner rig, sliding up the lead core as I cast out seems to be the way. Definitely having foam nuggets on to hold it all away from the weed, so when it melts it just flutters down onto it, has worked as well. And I'll be employing those tactics in other swims around the lake in the next session. So I'm really looking forward to next week. It's going to be a little bit cooler, a little bit of drizzle, very good conditions for a bite in the day. Let's see what happens. It is now 5:30, just getting light. And as I've said many times before, getting here at first light is a major edge. I know not everybody can do it, and you know, if you can only get here after work on a Friday or whatever, then try and get down one day during the week early in the morning, you know, preferably Friday morning. But if you got there late Thursday night and saw what was happening, it tells you so much more. Those first couple of hours of daylight, you know, the fish reveal where they've been the night before, where they're feeding. It's such an edge. It's such a great way to start when you know you're on fish.
I've done quite a few laps of the lake before settling on the point swim. It's done some good fish recently, but that wasn't the reason I chose it. I'd seen several fish show near where the bites had come from, so starting there was a no-brainer. Learning from last week, I knew the first few hours offered the best chance of a quick bite, so I flicked out 3 single pop-ups towards the showing fish, making sure that I got a decent drop indicating clear spots or low-lying weed. After bite time came and went, I decided to properly interrogate the swim for tonight and tomorrow morning. As usual, I used a marker rod and just a lead to feel for the clear spots. This took a lot of casts, and after maybe an hour, I looped the lead off and slid a marker float on to give me something to aim at. I baited in a line with about 20 spoms of whole and chopped link boilie, and then let off about 6 feet of line and re-clipped the spom to land another 10 to 15 spoms just past the rigs. This was to create a large baited area to build the fish's confidence. The 3 rods then went out onto the clearer spots. This was loads of commotion, but is simply unavoidable when the fish are at range and it's really weedy. All the ranges get written down in my phone, so next time I'm in that swim I can get out quietly without using the marker float at all.
I'm now in the 3rd swim I've fished in 24 hours. I went round to Windy Corner, put a couple of rods out. It didn't feel quite clear enough, to be honest, on the left hand side. It took me a few casts to sort of get it anything like I was happy with. The right hand side was definitely okay, and I fished a solid bag on that with a cog lead on the inside. Didn't really see any fish around there, and then I started to see them out here basically, and they were showing literally just behind me, behind the reeds there. There's a great big weed bed, and I've seen them. The last time I was here I saw them showing there as well. When we came round and stood here, 2 or 3 showed sort of literally within about 30 yards of the bank, just off to the left there. So I've got 1 rod there at 7.5 wraps. I had a good cast around just with the marker lead first, no float on it at all, and basically I had the fishing rods here when the fish started to show, so I flicked a fishing rod out, got a reasonable drop on it, clipped it up and then stored it, and then I went round the sticks. It was 8.5 times, so then I wrapped up the marker rod, put that out 8.5 wraps and just bounced it back along the bottom because it was a little bit too far out, and settled on 7.5, and it's still reasonably firm. There's little tiny bits of weed there, perfect for fishing a little pop up on a helicopter rig over the top. So I just sprayed baits out with the throwing stick all over that, put a couple of 100 baits out there, and then fish showed further out as well, and I did the same thing with the other fishing rod, whacked it out to where I saw the fish show, felt the lead down, and it was a nice solid thump as well. Clipped that one up, wound it in, went round the sticks. That was 18.5, and I cast around with a marker lead, clipped it up at 18.5, cast around, and to the left of the area there's weed almost up to the surface at 18.5. So what I've done is I've come back to 16.5. I'm just short of the weed, and it's just a nice dull thud. It's like that firm silt. It's not gravel. It's a bit deeper over here, probably 10-12 foot. But the most important thing is I've seen loads of fish in this area, and doesn't matter how much bait and how much time you've invested in another spot. You know, there's 9 key of bait on that spot over there now, less what the tension, maybe a few carp have eaten, and I dare say that will spark up in the morning and fish will start showing over it because there's no line out there now. I can always move back, I know what my marks are, but there were far more fish in this quadrant of the lake than anywhere else, and basically I just had to move. So I've just been into the corner, re-dragged it just to clear it out a little bit more. I've put more bait over the top of that as well, and with the wind pumping in here and the fish showing so close on the other side of the weed bed, there's a very good chance that area is going to spark up tomorrow, and I'm going to be able to catch one right under my feet. But for now I've got 3 rods on the money. The fish are in this part of the lake. Let's see what happens.
It was the morning of day 3. Nothing had occurred overnight, but during the morning the weather had properly turned. A strong southwest wind was howling into my area, so instead of stalking my rake spots, I stuck it out in the rat's nest. I put out just a few pouch loads of chopped boilie, redid the rods, and later that afternoon I was into a fish off the marginal spot.
Well, it's middle of the afternoon. The margin rod, or the rod at, just flipped over the, freak me out, the line just flipped over him. Off. The margin rod has charged off. Pretty tight in this swim. In fact, I think I'm going to get in. Lots of weed there, just got to keep it moving. Looks like one of the good ones. Looks like one of the good uns. Get in that net, get in that net. Boss, got him! Yes! Oh, after all that effort, that is so worth it. Yeah, man, that's one of the known ones, definitely. Oh, get in. Oh, yes. Yes, yes, yes.
No matter how big the fish is, I still always get the rod back out first. A few pouch loads of chop baits went out before the rig, and after getting a nice firm drop, I could hold up the fish for the all-important trophy shots.
And it is a 30-pounder. Get in. Only just though. 30 pound, 8 ounces. Get in. Well, how about that for a Weedy Lake result? One of the original Oxfordshire mirrors, 30 pound an ounces. I'm sure it's got a name, I don't know what it is, but who cares? What an awesome, awesome creature. And it's made all the effort worthwhile. There's a lot of energy expended yesterday, moving about and trying to get spots going. And in the end, it was just being on the wind and being where the fish were. The afternoon, a few fish have started showing, and this is the result. Again, taken on the little spinner rig, little tiny link pop up, just fished the length of the hook off the bottom on a helicopter rig with a few link boilies over the top. And this is the result. I am absolutely over the moon.
The rods are 12 foot 3 3/4 Bezier DF X45s. 3 3/4 might sound like a broom handle to you, and I see a lot of chatter on the internet about why do they always use such heavy rods all the time. Well, the reason is it's got the power there if you need it. When I started on this lake, I was fishing at 5 3/4 wraps. You know, at the beginning of this session, I was fishing at 24.5 wraps. You know, so there's a major difference in the distance I'm fishing, and because I've got 20-pound line on, and you can see here we've got a big old wind blowing in your face, you need a powerful rod in order to achieve those distances with pinpoint accuracy. And that is the thing, you've got to be dropping it literally on a dustbin lid to make sure you're in the bit that's got a bit more low-lying weed, you know, rather than going 6 foot to the right and ending up in a massive weed bed and then the rig's not fishing. So I would recommend you use a rod 12 foot 3.5 pound as a minimum if you're going to fish weedy lakes all the time. And you've seen, you know, I've had bites close in and I've landed those fish. I haven't pulled out of them. I've had some absolutely epic battles with them where I'm trying to pull them out of lilies and everything else. And providing you're letting the rod do the work and you're not pointing it straight at the fish, you're not going to pull the hooks out or snap the line. So my advice is be the master of a heavy set of rods. They're so much more versatile. You can fish out a distance or you can fish right under your feet. The reels are not so important. What I've got on here is the absolute Rolls Royce. They're the new Beziers. They're absolutely beautiful reels. My sort of favourite colouring in matte black. The line laying on them is fantastic. You know, but if I was stepping up to a weedy water, I wouldn't have to go and spend 1,200 quid on reels to do it. Yes, you would need heavier rods if you only had, say, 12 foot 2.5 or 12 foot 3 pound test curve and they're a bit soft, but most reels will probably do the job. These ones have got really kind line clips, and that's really, really important. If you've got a reel that's got a little jaggedy sort of line clip and they're not too kind to the line and it's marking the line, when you're hitting the clip, dropping it on the spot, you can weaken the line and then get snapped up. So my advice is stick with a reputable company like Daiwa. All their line clips are really kind to the line and you'll find yourself using them all the time when you're fishing in weed. The line I've got on is 20 pound touchdown, which is 0.43 diameter, super, super thick line. And that's obviously for two reasons. One, for strength, but also for durability. You know, when you're playing the fish through the weed, you can feel it inching back. There could be little zebra mussels in the weed that could cut through the line. The thicker the line you've got on, the more robust it's going to be and the longer it's going to last. And you will find you'll trash your line a lot faster on weedy lakes than you will on lakes that have got no weeding at all. So I'll put this line on before I actually started this session, so it's brand new for these sessions. And the way I'll put it on, I just use a little bit of tape on the spool to tape it on, because let's face it, if a fish takes 250 yards of line off you, it might as well have the whole lot. You know, you're never going to get down to that bottom bit. It's never going to see the light of day. When I change it over, I just cut it with a sharp knife. It comes off really, really quickly.
bit of tape on, and then when I wind it on, I make sure with a touchdown that the spool is spinning in a bucket of water. When it's spinning, that means it's not going on with any twist. If you've got the spool laying flat, as it comes off the spool, it's going on to the reel twisted, and that's when you can get frap ups around the butt ring and get all kinds of terrible problems. So my advice, if you're using any of our lines, always make sure the spool is spinning as it goes onto the reel. And I stop, as I'm winding, I stop every now and again, look through the butt eye, and if it's going perfectly straight through the butt eye, it means it's going on with no twist. If it's twisting round the butt eye and getting caught as you slacken off, then the spool is in the wrong orientation. So you either need to lay it flat, or in the case of the Calder lines, stand it on its side. So it's not overfilled as well. That's the other thing that's important. With big heavy line like this, it will come off the spool really easily. So I've just filled them up to the lip, and I make sure I keep the line wet all the time. When I go around the distance sticks, I always flick it a little bit first, don't cast it too hard, wind it back in so it's nice and tight and the line's wet, and then go for it. You see loads of people go around the sticks, whack it straight away, they get a massive frap up and snap everything off. The other thing about the touchdown that is so important is its low stretch. So it's only about 10% stretch. Most monos are 20 to 25%. And that low stretch means you can feel the lead hit the bottom so much better. And it's something that you have to master if you're going to fish weedy waters. You must know what the rig's landing on, so you know whether it's in a couple of inches of weed, a foot of weed, or 6 foot of weed. It's so important, and if you've not done it before, literally start off by literally bouncing the lead on the bottom off the tip of the rod, then cast it a little bit further, catch it, feel it hit the bottom, donk, right, you know what that feels like, go a little bit further, do it again and do it again. And our new Calder coach, Rob Burgess, he teaches people exactly like that who've never felt the lead hit the bottom, and I promise you, once you get it, it's something like riding a bike you can never forget. The touchdown as well sinks really well. I use it in the green colour. I found from all the underwater stuff I've done when I've been out scuba diving and the stuff we've done when we've been catching fish on the cameras, green seems to blend in so much better. Even if you look down and the water looks a browny colour, when you get in and look through it, as the fish would be, it always looks green. So I use green lines for all of my fishing. Now you can see here I've got it set up 2 different ways. So I've got 2 lines that are sort of semi-slack. So the stow bobbins are hanging down with a bit of weight on them. The lines are going reasonably slack off the tips, just bowing out there. And what I want to do is have the line on the bottom near the rig, but off the bottom back towards me. Then I get really positive bite indication. I'm fishing further out on those rods, just about 70 yards. I don't know what weed is out there, so I want to be into contact with the fish as quickly as possible. The left-hand rod is fished really close in. I'm less than 30 yards out there, so I've slackened right off. And I've done that so that the line is going along the bottom down to the rig, so the fish can come in and feed and not come into contact with the line. You see a lot of people on weedy lakes fishing close in deep water, and they've got bowstring tight lines. And yeah, sometimes you need it. If the fish are constantly weeding you up, you need to be on the rod quickly. But I've found in situations like this where there's just clumps of weed here and there, I'd rather have the line slack, get the bite in the first place, and then worry about it. On the first session I was fishing very slack as well. Even though I was fishing down the side of those lily pads, I was fishing slack lines and I was fishing a reasonably loose clutch, because what I wanted to do was the fish to run, the lead to come off the heli safe, the fish to go past the lilies, and then I could get onto it and steer it away. If I'd fished all locked up in that situation, I just know the fish would have darted straight into the lilies and they would have done me before I even picked the rod up. So I've sort of tricked them into running away from the lilies. In other situations, like when I was fishing on the point swim at the start of this session, I've got the clutches pretty tight. I'm fishing a lot further out, just shy of 100 yards, and I want to know straight away. The weight's on the bobbins, that was going to pull up to the top, the clutch was pretty tight, I'd wind down and be straight into it to stop it charging off through loads of weed beds. So you have to think, what situation am I in? Do I want the fish to run away from the weed, or am I worried it's going to run into the weed? So if it's going to run in, fish it tight. If it's going to run away from it, fish it slack. And the whole lot is sitting on my favourite single system, absolutely rock solid that is. Use it everywhere that I go, whether it's stage stands or pushing it straight into the ground like this. And most importantly, it's the angle of the rod that you want to be thinking about. When you're playing a fish, what am I going to be doing? Guiding the fish over the top of the other lines. In that case, you want very low tips and slack lines, or am I going to be playing it underneath the other lines? And in that case, you want the tips up high and the lines tighter. So when you first get into a swim, you should be thinking about, when I get one on, how am I going to land it? Where is the fish going to come into? Where is it safest to have the landing net? Do I need the tips up in the air, or do I want them down nice and low? So that's the hardware I'm using when I'm fishing weedy waters. Priority number 1 is a more powerful set of rods.
The final morning was wet and cold and nothing showed in my part of the lake, but that didn't stop me watching like a hawk. Fish started to show off the bottom bank in the late afternoon, so I moved round and managed to get 3 decent drops of the lead for the last few hours. Nothing happened, but I still had 3 new areas marked for future sessions and had time to form a plan to fish another embryo lake just up the road. This is the Cable Syndicate in Abingdon. It's only about half an hour away from Stanton, and like a lot of lakes in this part of the world, it's hellishly weedy. But even though it's a different venue, the same weed fishing rules apply and can prove equally successful. The stock in cables is about 100 carp. There were 8 to 10 originals left in here. The otter fence went up last winter and embryo stocked 90 new fish after that, and they're all shapes and sizes. There's mirrors, commons, levers, linears. They've all really darkened up because the water here is really clear most of the year. That unfortunately gives rise to loads of weed, and this lake and Phil's Lake next door to it have historically always been really weedy. That makes the fishing really interesting, but it also makes it quite technical as well. The major change from Stanton to here is that I'm using a wafter hook bait because I'm fishing on clean bottom out there. There's weed everywhere else, but where the rig's actually coming to rest is nice firm silt. Putting plenty of bait out there, and I love fishing wafters in the summer when the fish are really switched on to the freebies. You know, you want something at the same level as where all those freebies are rather than popped up above it. So I've got a 15mm link wafter that I've soaked in some of the garlic supreme goo. It doesn't change the colour of the bait at all, it just gives it that extra little bit of attraction over the top of all that freebie out there. You're trying to hone the fish into the hook bait faster than everything else, so you haven't got like a needle in a haystack situation, and that is working really well. Everywhere I've taken the garlic, I've just done brilliantly on it. And you see there a small bait with a really big hook, and that's something else that we incorporate in our fishing all the time now. You'll see Dover using size 4 cranks with a 12mm pop-up. You know, it looks really unsightly, but it really works. And I think it's because there's so little bait to get in the way of the hook catching hold, and the hook is so big, it just snares in the mouth every time. Now on the back of the size 2 curve, I've got one of the D-rig kickers. I've spent the last couple of years developing these, fished them all over the world, just had some absolutely amazing results on them. Every hook hold is just like bang in the bottom lip. They're just absolutely nailed, and they're just so easy to use. So basically what I do is put a little tiny micro ring swivel onto the D-rig kicker. That goes onto the tapered end first, and then I slide it onto the hook. I cut the little tiny bit of the taper off. In this situation, because I'm going over the top of one of those spinner swivels, you don't want the tapered bit on there. If I was just going to use it on a normal combi rig, you'd want the taper on, just like there is on a normal kicker, just to neaten everything off. But in this situation, that little tapered bit gets in the way. So you slide the fatter bit onto the hook first, and then the thinner bit on, the top bit up there. And then basically the hook is clipped onto that spinner swivel. Now the trickiest bit of this is getting it pulled over the top of that spinner swivel so it's all neat and tidy and there's no way the hook can get off. And what I normally use is one of the crimp tools and just my fishing towel, and then I just pull it down onto there, maybe wet the eye of the hook to slide it onto it. But once you've done that once, it sort of stretches that material, and often when I'm catching fish and I'm changing the hook really quickly, I'll slide everything off, I'll make the hook barbless, slide the whole D-rig off, slide it onto another hook, clip that hook onto the spinner swivel, and then pull it down. The thing I think that makes it so good, it's not that it's anti-eject, I think it's just the way the bait and the hook are really close together, but as soon as the hook turns and catches hold, the bait just gets out of the way and allows the hook to do its job. Just sits perfectly every time out there. These baits just hover above the hook, so the hook lays flat on the bottom and the bait is just above it, so it's obscuring the sight of the hook as well. And these size 2 curves are so sharp, so strong. Even in weedy situations like this, I've got no problem with bullying the fish. You know, you could say you could go down to a size 4 curve, but I have fished them in these sort of situations, and when I've got fish in, I've opened them up slightly in certain situations. So I don't think they're quite strong enough for really big fish in weedy conditions. That's why I go up to a size 2. You could swap over to a size 4 wide Gape X, just use the next size down of kicker, so it pulls up to the top of the hook just as it is there, and they'll work brilliantly as well. What I tend to do with the size 4 wide Gape X is I'll in-turn the eye of the hook a little bit more just by putting the eye into the crimp tool and then just applying a bit of pressure to in-turn the eye a bit more so the hook flips over that bit faster and a bit more aggressively. And then the hook link itself, my old faithful boom material. This is the 25-pound boom, about 5 inches long, crimped at either end, and basically that stays on the lead core leader forever. If I don't want to change the length of it or it doesn't get damaged, then I'll use that session after session after session. I'm still using a helicopter rig because you never know what you're going to be casting on these places. Here it's silty. If I went to the swim next door, I might be fishing over 2 foot of Canadian, and then I'll be moving that no trace bead a lot further up the lead core leader so the lead can plummet into the weed and the hook bait can sit on top. And in that situation, I'll probably swap back over to a pop-up just like I used at Stanton. I've got a heli lead on the end there, really flat on the bottom, so you feel that thud as the lead hits the bottom, and that's probably the most important thing when you're fishing weedy lakes. You have to master the art of feeling the lead hit the bottom. If you don't know what you're fishing on, how can you construct a rig that presents the hook bait effectively over it? So a helicopter rig is definitely the safest way to go. If you use a heli safe as well, you're dumping the lead every single time, and that again is absolutely essential on weedy lakes. You've got to be dropping the lead. So either one of those or a hybrid lead clip, and then you know the lead is definitely going to come off. But in this situation, it makes it so versatile for me. The lead core is so durable as well, you know, so I can fish session after session, and there's no need to change that at all. If you're not allowed to use lead core, I would fish this setup naked, but what you want to have on there is one of the line saver beads, and that will basically protect the line, because as that comes down to the bottom there and I'm playing the fish, there's a lot of pressure on the line at that point. By using the line saver beads, you're just extending the life of the line, but I would cut that heli safe off every now and again, slide the line saver bead up out the way, retie it back on so you've got a fresh bit of line there, and you should have no problems. So that's my preferred setup for fishing weedy waters. If you swap between a wafter and a pop-up, your hook bait is always going to be in the right position. Fishing the hook baits close to the deck quickly proved effective, and I found myself bent into the first fish of the session.
Oh, this fish is taking me right round the corner. It's not good. Come back out the other way. That's it, that's it, that's it, that's it, good. Well, this fish must be radio controlled. That went right into the reeds. And it's just come back out again. The weed here has made it almost unfishable in the summer, and it's just started to die down. And the fishing here is a little bit different from Stanton in that you're fishing on clear spots with weed all around. So I'm fishing with link wafters. This one's on a helicopter rig. Come on fella, this way, this way, this way, this way. There he is. Come on, in you come, get in that net. Oh no! Come on mate, this time. Get in that net, get in that net. Bosh, got him! Wicked. Oh, that is good to be off the mark so quickly. There we go. What an awesome, awesome carp to start our session at Cables. 24 pound on the button, this one. Just blackened right up. The water's so clear here. They go really, really dark. I think this is one of Simon Scott's babies, a VS fish. Probably went in here last winter, I would guess at sort of scraper 20. So it's putting weight on, which is brilliant. And I can't wait to get more of them. But for now, a brilliant start. Kiting mad. He's going to do me in the weed. Oh, he's gone out the other way. Oh, he's going back into the weed again. Whoa. That is a stroke of luck, that is. Always going back that way again. A load of, oof. there's a load of weed to the left and the right of this swim, and they're just making for it every time. This is why you need heavy gear for this sort of fishing. Proper heart in your mouth stuff, this. Same rod as before, didn't put any bait out just because it felt like I was going to get another bite quickly, and baiting on the heads, you know, might delay the action or scare them off completely. So that was definitely the right thing to do. Try to keep him underneath them other lines. This time, come on. You see the net? Get in that net. Get in that net. Get in that net. Bosh! Got him! These are epic, epic battles. Yeah, man, another 20, 23 and a quarter. Touch. Yeah, man, check that one out. What an absolute stunner. Just over 23 pound, and just like the first one, taken on a wafter rather than a pop-up. You remember on Stanton I was using pop-ups most of the time because there was so much weed out there. I just wanted to lift the hook up out of the weed, but here I'm fishing on nice firm silt, so I'm using a wafter. Still on a helicopter rig on this particular rod, but a match the hatch link wafter, just soaked in a bit of that garlic goo. And at this time of the year when the fish are feeding really hard, I've put loads of pellet out there, loads of boilie. I want my hook bait at the same level as all the other baits, rather than popped up above it. And 2 takes in the first couple of hours of fishing is proof that it's definitely working. Location on weedy lakes is very dependent upon when you want to get your bites. So if you're doing quick overnighters, you don't really want to be fishing the swims that are absolutely full of weed. In the day, the weed's giving out oxygen, and that's why a lot of the time if you walk around in the middle of the day, the sun's up, the fish are all in the weed, sort of bow waving around, enjoying the oxygen rich water. At night, the opposite happens, so actually the oxygen is depleted in those areas. So if you're doing quick overnighters, my advice is to find open water areas near the weed where you see the fish showing first thing in the morning. Often you'll see them out in open water first thing in the morning, then during the day they'll migrate in. So I've chosen this particular swim called the Stocking. This is where the fish were stocked here last winter, and I've chosen here because it's got really good form first thing in the morning. I opted not to fish the first night, I just baited up and then waited until the morning to put the lines out, and sure enough I've had a couple of takes within the first couple of hours of casting out. During the day the fish have been here as well, and that's why I haven't moved down to the other end. I did bait a swim at the other end of the lake called the Little Beach, and that's got formed during the day. There's lots of weed down there, lots of big floating rafts of weed, and when it gets hot the fish love that area. There's a couple of other swims called the Underarm which are right underneath the cables here, so you can literally only underarm the rods out. The fish love it in there during the day, especially when it's hot, but because today's not been like that and the fish have still been cruising around here on the surface, I've stayed put. So if you're doing quick overnighters, then I suggest you fish out in open water away from the weed, and if you're turning up during the day, definitely look for the weediest areas. I've been baiting regularly during the day because these fish are young and they really respond to the pellet that the syndicate managers are putting in on a regular basis. So rather than just leaving the swim alone for hours and hours and hours, if I feel like the activity out there is sort of diminished, maybe the ducks have been on me eating quite a bit of the bait, then I'll put some more bait out. And the last time I put 10 spoms out of pellet and boilie, and I'm just going to leave it now until it gets dark. The plan is to fish tonight. If I don't get anything in the next couple of hours, then I'll definitely fish through the night and refresh bait. If I get more bites, I'll put more bait out during the dark. Everything's clipped up. I'm fishing 13 rod lengths on the fishing rods, 12.5 rod lengths with a spom, because it swings back towards me a little bit on the fishing rods where the spom stays put on the surface. So it's something to put into your fishing. It's really, really important. If, like me, when you're feeling the lead down, you've got the rod up in the air, always fish the spom slightly shorter than your fishing rods. And what I've done here is put the marker float out, cast the spom out to it. The marker float's hit the clip at 13 rod lengths. When I've put the spom around the distance sticks at 12.5 and cast it out, it's landed in almost exactly the same position. So I'm dropping right on top of my rigs, and day or night it means I can be super accurate with the baiting.
The highlights for me over these last few sessions, well, it's got to be on that first session in the afternoon when we turned back up in the swim after doing a bit of stalking, and the fish were there and they were feeding on the bait I'd put in previously, and to get 2 bites in quick succession, having epic battles with them and landing 2 really stunning old fish. You know, that was definitely one of the best moments for me. It's important for me to be consistent and to extract as many fish out of a swim as I possibly can. You know, when you get one big one, like I did that 30-pounder on the second session, yes, it's brilliant, and it confirms that you've got it right, but multiple hits always feel better to me, irrespective of the size of fish. The key points: definitely feeding the lead hit at the bottom is a skill that you must master if you're going to fish weedy lakes. If you don't know what you're fishing on, how can you construct a rig to perfectly present on it? So that's something that you should practice over and over again. Start off on places that are not weedy, where the water's a bit deeper, start really close in and then work further out. And in the end, you will be able to tell the difference between a bit of firm silt that I've got here, 2 inches of weed, 6 inches of weed, 2 foot of weed, 6 foot of weed. And that will catch you so many fish throughout your angling career. The other thing is strong kit. You can't go onto weedy lakes, you know, with very light rods, light line, and expect to land everything. You've seen there've been epic battles with virtually every fish on these 2 venues, and if I hadn't had 20-pound touchdown on and a big strong hook, I probably would have lost some of those fish. Also the rigs, without doubt, helicopter rigs are the most versatile, moving that top bead up and down depending on how much weed you're fishing over, and swapping from a pop-up to a wafter depending on whether it's clean or whether it's weedy, you know, will continue to get you bites whatever type of water that you fish. Observation is absolutely key. You see I've got Polaroid sunglasses on all the time, got a cap on as well to shield my eyes from the sun, and keeping watching, keeping moving around, you know, and following the fish as they migrate around the lake as the oxygen levels go up and down is absolutely key. Knowing that you're fishing the right spots for the time of day that you can actually get to the lake is so important. So I hope in all this masterclass has demystified weed fishing for you. I hope it gives you the confidence to attack weedy waters in the future. It is very demanding fishing. It does take a lot of brain matter. It does take specialised kit, but boy is it worth it.